Hey everyone, this is Yerevan. For those of you who do not know who I am a writer, astrologer, and healing practitioner. I also offer flower essence consultations and create custom potions to help people work through various issues and to heal on certain levels. I want to talk today about fear, specifically how to overcome fear. This may not be a popular topic, but it is an all-pervading undercurrent now, as it has been throughout history. And there are some astrological reasons for this. However, this is not specifically what I wanted to discuss today. What I really wanted to do is I want to help empower those who are really struggling right now. Since the fear is being heightened, every time between in fall, the autumn season, and the winter, and as the sun enters Scorpio, it will be entering next week, and we have that full moon coming up, and we have a Halloween, which is the thinning of the veils. There is a lot of fear, and there's also the powers that be, if you will, for lack of a better term, those people behind government and the people who are behind the scenes, they know about all of this. They know the astrological currents, and they play on this, and they play on people's fears. And so it's no coincidence that Election Day happens at this time of year, and that there are so many political upheavals during this time of year. So the first step to overcoming fear is to become aware of what the source of that fear is, and also to figure out whether the fear is rational or irrational. Is this something that is actually life-threatening, that can damage you, or that likely will damage you, like if you were to hold your hand over a flame for a long period of time, and if you have a fear of that, then that's what I would call a rational fear. That's what most people would consider a rational fear. But if, however, there are things going on in this world beyond your control that may or may not affect you, and yet you find yourself fretting and obsessing and going over and over like a broken record, what if, and but that happened there to this person, that, and if it's on the news, it must be true, and that means it's coming for me and my family. And it's really important to work through these things, because it's so easy to let fear get the better of us. And when the fear is left unchecked, the fear begins to make choices and decisions for us, because we are no longer listening to intuition or even to the rational mind, the part of us that is capable of making rational decisions. And so that brings me to the statement I'm about to make, which is most people don't realize that a large percentage of their lives have been dictated by fear. Whether it's that they do or don't do certain things, whether it's that you go after or avoid specific things, this is because fear is now behind the steering wheel. And I want to talk about maybe it will help to describe a little bit of my own background and why I am so passionate about this, and why, what makes me an expert, why listen to me. Well, I had a life-threatening illness at a young age, and as a result of this illness, I became, how can you say, I was very much debilitated by my fear. Okay, it got to the point where I actually developed phobias and fears of things that I had never feared before. And it became irrational. The fears went from being rational to irrational. Also, the fears were so intense that I didn't think I would survive them. The anxiety attacks were so extreme that I would have heart palpitations that had me feeling like I was having a heart attack, that I would die any moment. And being such a small person, I was also losing a lot of weight, becoming atrophied. I could barely function. I could barely even think of leaving the front door without my knees caving in and just searing pains down my legs. And it was very intense. And there were days where my heart was pounding all day. And I know what it's like to feel like you're losing your mind, just like you're just gonna completely lose it and go insane, and how certain things can be a trigger to just go off the deep end. But there was always a part of me that was determined, without help, without the use of any pharmaceutical drugs. At that point, I was not seeing a doctor. I refused. By that time, I had already made an oath to myself that, okay, these people know nothing of what's really going on in my body or my psyche, and it's up to me. Even though I was very young, I knew that I had to figure this out or I would die. And I would have, I knew that dying was a better option than giving what felt to me like giving my soul or my body literally as an experiment, because they didn't know what the hell was going on. So it was even more scary in a way, because I was left to my own devices. But I'm here to tell you that if I could do it, given the circumstances, you can do it too. If you are struggling with intense fear or just an undercurrent of anxiety, whether it's extreme or mild anxiety, and it doesn't matter what it's about, I know that everyone has within them the ability to heal and to overcome deep-set patterns, and that as an individual, you are the only one who can unlock certain things within your own psyche. So I'm a proponent of doing the work oneself rather than going to a shrink or going to a doctor all the time. It doesn't mean that there's never a time or a place that those people can be helpful, but to me, it's always a last resort when things get really desperate, Okay, then, if you need surgery, of course, go to a surgeon. If you're really losing it, then sure. But I think that we live in a culture that creates even more fear of going within, because we have the fear of what we might find. It's like this complete it's a catch-22, really. We have to understand the sources of the anxiety and their domino effects, which are not the same for all of us, because not all of us have the same sensitivities. We don't all have the same triggers. So get to know yourself and why, what, where. For some people, it can be the effect of substance abuse, which obviously leaves you vulnerable on a number of levels. If you're abusing substances, then it's a well-known fact that substances can change your brain chemistry for the worse, and that you can begin to feel like you're losing control, like you no longer even have control of your own thoughts. And you can have extreme insomnia or paranoia or just a whole slew of other symptoms. There's also wrong diet. Something as simple as making a dietary adjustment can radically improve your whole demeanor and your whole outlook and just how you feel in your own skin and your heart rate, everything. If you're eating well and you don't abuse drugs and you still have anxiety, maybe you just have a lot of pent-up emotions, and they're not always negative emotions. The funny thing is that anxiety does not always necessarily stem from negativity. Sometimes it can be an excess of joy or even pride, or the excess creates this kind of like where you're just brimming over and you just don't know what to do with it and you got to shake it out somehow. Or it could be a bit of everything. You could just have pent-up rage, you could have depression, you could feel completely crammed, and you can feel oppressed and repressed and like you're just imploding, which obviously creates a anxiety effect. And then you add on top of that the media and the pollution and the psychic attack that comes to us from all angles in today's world. And you're weakened. And the more you buy into the fear, the more you're weakened. And the less you can, again, tap into your own still small voice within, that voice of truth, that voice of intuition, that knows the way no matter what. We all have that. And how to access that? Well, I highly recommend meditation. What kind of meditation is up to you. There are hundreds of thousands of methods, just as there are of ways to worship God or to connect with source energy and whatever that is that you know there's more to life than meets the physical eye. And just knowing that, even if you can't even put a name to that, can be helpful, can be comforting. So a simple meditation that one can perform is just simply finding the time, making way in your life for a 2 to 5 minute session where you're just sitting down, you're not controlling your thoughts, you're not trying to do anything or focus on anything, but you've created a time and a space. And specifically, this is useful if you can do it every day, if you have a discipline of some sort in your life. It begins to build something in your psyche, the same way that anything else is built. Anything else in your mind, like a fearful thought, a worry that just goes around and around in a circle and it snowballs and it gets bigger and bigger. Well, if you can just sit there and say to yourself, every day I'm going to sit here and do this at this time. It could be first thing in the morning, or it could be in the middle of the day or at night. It could be knitting. It could be that you want to bird watch. It could be that you literally sit in lotus position. It doesn't really matter what method you choose, but it's something that is obviously to quiet your mind. For some people, it's a little more active, like walking, but still make sure that it's not walking with friends and talking and having headphones on, because again, then you're just distracting yourself from yourself. So the point of the meditation is to allow yourself access to your subconscious, access to your higher, to your superconscious, access to your inner self. And if that makes you feel anxious, then the task is to sit through it, because it will not last. You have to look it in the eye just long enough that it begins to soften its grip. And for those who are interested, I can share techniques on that, how that's done later on. But just continuing on with this particular talk, there are so many different, there are so many other sources of anxiety. Also, they can come through psychic attack. Psychic attack comes to us, again, through the media, and all kinds of attack come to us through the fluoride, through whatever gets dropped, in those chemtrails. We have psychic attack, and we have physical attack through all the chemicals that are in the food and petrochemicals and things pumped into the air and different sound currents. And when you think about that, and that's the thing, a lot of people who are listening to this are people who are aware of the conspiracies in the world. Some of you may completely deny those things exist, and some of you may be the type that know, and it's nothing shocking. And then other people, the more they know, the more fearful they become. It's like, here I go down the rabbit hole. There's no turning back. Life will never be the same. I don't think I can live through it. Oh, the world, it's just all coming to an end, and it's just so hard to move through. And that's exactly what those evil powers that be want. That's exactly where they want you and how they want you. And if you're anything like me, it just pisses you off and you go, you know what? No. Actually, I'm going to make the best of this. I'm going to tap into my true voice, despite the fact that I'm under all this attack. And nobody and no thing can stop you from doing that much. So, and I know not everybody's like me, and there are plenty of people who just feel completely hopeless. And again, that is why I'm putting this out there, because I want to underline that I was in a place in my life. There was a time that I did not think I was going to survive the kind of fear that had me gripped from the inside out, completely body, mind, spirit. I was non-functional. And to say that it was scary is an understatement. I want to underline a few other things, a few other sources of anxiety. Sometimes, speaking of illness, the fear arises out of illness. For example, if your organs are out of balance, let's use some Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine, for example, because I think they have a beautiful and very thorough model of how the interplay of body, mind, and spirit. And they use the 5 elements, and all the elements are corresponding to different organs of the body, and all of the orifices, all the openings in the face are the gateways to the organs, and they all have corresponding emotions. So it's well known in Eastern medicine that most emotions, including fear, are the result of some sort of imbalance in the body. You can't separate emotions from the body. So fear lives in typically the kidneys. The kidneys are where fear and anxiety are stored. Also the liver, but the liver is more the warehouse of anger and all really extreme negative emotions. Not exclusively that, but it is the largest organ. So if there is a predominance of negative outlook and emotions in a person, check out if you're doing healing work on them, check out the energy around the liver. There may or may not be a physical manifestation yet, but they're in time, left unchecked, that's usually what happens. So the kidneys is where life force energy is stored. So our life force energy is under attack. Okay, so how to empower ourselves, realize that we are energetic beings. We are not just these physical beings. We only succumb to these attacks when we believe the lies and when we believe that this is all there is to us and that we're easy targets. But when we know that we are more than these bodies, and we exercise that knowing through the choices we make and through the thoughts we continue to think and the words we speak, then we are empowering ourselves. We become conscious co-creators in life instead of just feeling so manipulated. So, and I know also, I just want to say, I know that some illnesses are a lot harder to recover from, or there might be something chronic or deep set, and it may take considerable work to move through that. And I'm not trying to belittle anyone's experience when I say that we are, to say, oh, we're just energy and just think good thoughts and it'll all go away. No, trust me, I know it takes a lot more work than that. However, it can be done, but you have to start with your own belief system and where you're at, and everyone's journey is different. So embrace where you are and just know that somewhere inside of you, not only is there the capacity to heal, but there's a reason for what you're going through, and that even if it's something that might be something you have to live with for the rest of your life, you can embrace it in such a way that it's less of a burden to you. And you begin to make use of yourself, knowing that you have a unique place in this world, despite whatever the thing is that you feel holds you back and makes you less than. That less than is just a belief, or it's based on a comparison you're making to something you wish you were and aren't. So these are just a few different things. Also, I know this is going to sound a bit woo-woo for some people or too far-fetched, but it must be said that in some cases, anxiety is the result of spirit possession and hauntings. Take it or leave it, but this is something I also know from experience, that healthy people or people that have compromised immune systems can occasionally suffer from anxiety that is due to not necessarily being possessed. I'm not talking about being possessed by demons, but typically by discarnates who are typically attracted to a body or an area because they are seeking help, or because that's their space and they don't want you in that space. That's a whole topic in itself that I can go into another time, but I just wanted to mention it because sometimes that anxiety is produced because it feels like so much like it's your own anxiety, but it's actually you can feel this strange sort of alien pressure on your chest. And if you ask yourself, is this my stuff? Is this really me, or am I picking up on or feeling sort of weighted by beings around me? And if so, is there something I can do about it? And if not, then how do I get this out of my space? Again, that's a topic, and sometimes that's easy to do, and sometimes it requires help. And but it's good to be aware. In rare cases, the anxiety stems from an intuitive sort of nudging, meaning that many people actually have a sort of anxiety because they're avoiding certain things. But sometimes the anxiety is because you are literally getting a strong warning about something, or you're being urged to do something from your own inner self. Your intuition is saying, go there. Oh, make that turn. Don't make that turn on the freeway quite yet, off the freeway quite yet. Just keep going straight, or turn off sooner, and you don't know why until later, but maybe there was a crash that you avoided. And that, again, is rare because not too many people are that plugged in to their intuition, but that does happen occasionally, that you get this sudden, once in a while, as an intuitive reader, that has happened to me, where I, again, seldom, but suddenly this just cold wave, like, ooh, don't have a good feeling about that, and I have to be careful how I say it to someone. But it, just something to touch on. So then, that brings me to the topic of fear as something that's either short-term or long-term. Obviously, we all have had fears of something or other pass through us at some point in life. And sometimes those were small fears, and sometimes they were large fears, but they passed. If you have a fear of heights, it's not something you think about until you are confronted with being high up somewhere. Then there are long-term fears, which then turn into what's called worry or anxiety. And, well, we've been talking about the anxiety. So it's important to know that when you do have an excess of worry, anxiety, that it is a messenger. It is a messenger, just as fear is a warning. Fear is a warning, okay, something's going on, this could hurt you, or whatever. And then the worry or anxiety is sometimes even that you're avoiding doing something that could benefit you, and you're procrastinating. Ooh, there's a big one. Procrastination can cause enormous anxiety because you're thinking all the reasons why you shouldn't or can't. You're making excuses, and you're sitting on the thing you should be doing. You're suffocating it to death. So of course you're going to have anxiety. So that's why I say get up or find a space to listen to what the anxiety is saying. And if you realize, well, this feels really physical, it's not going away, then try try changing your diet up a bit, or just experiment. See where is this coming from? I'm not giving medical advice, by the way, but I am underlining that the fear needs to be explored and then either acted upon or discharged. So then there's the fear that some people have before a performance of some kind, or before they go on a date or a meeting with someone. And that fear is somewhere between rational and irrational. It really depends on the occasion. But that too that's an important fear to confront and to explore, okay? Because many people are really held back from doing certain things because they're afraid of failing. They're afraid of looking stupid. They're afraid of forgetting their lines in a play or whatever it is, in a speech. So first thing is, make sure that you've memorized all the parts and that you feel confident. But then, of course, when you're nervous, it's easy to forget. And then go over in your mind, what's the worst thing that could happen? And try to not look at everyone as someone that's judging you. The truth is, people are always judging whether you're on a stage or not. And that's just part of life. So one of the things that I've found that helped me overcome the fear of going out there in the world and doing certain things, in my case, I had to start with very basic things like leaving the house and walking down the street. And several years ago, I gave a presentation on overcoming fear, and I had it on the whiteboard, all the mantras I told myself in order to walk down the street. And I know that sounds really silly, but that's where I was. And I didn't ever dream that I could move, that I could do all the things I've done since then. I've performed on stage, dancing and playing guitar, and I've gone to all sorts of places and talked to all sorts of people from all walks of life. And now I've relocated myself from California to the Netherlands. I never dreamed I would even have the guts to do this. So it's something that I'm saying this because some people don't realize how the fear is literally just how gripping it is, and yet how possible it is to move beyond that. And one of the movies that really inspired me many years ago is the movie Fearless with Jeff Bridges. That movie just completely changed my outlook when I saw it. And even though it was a different story altogether, it was a different plot, and it was a man who was the main character and the man who was sort of playing out this theme, I felt like I could really relate to him. And it really helped me to go out there in the world with a similar attitude, not doing stupid things, of course, but in my case, I did have to start simple. I had to start with, okay, how to get myself. I used to walk up and down the street like it was nothing, and I walked for miles. And now I have to start from scratch, almost like I'm a baby. Take baby steps. So this is how you do it, okay? When it's an irrational fear, whether it's something you've never done or it's based on a trauma, in my case, it was a phobia that had developed due to trauma of being out in public and having things happen, such as losing consciousness and people gathered around me. Well, that was damn humiliating. And after 4 times of that happening, I didn't want it to happen again, obviously. So I had to learn I had to train my body again and my mind. I had to develop a new rapport. I had to learn how to trust my body again, to develop trust that my body was not going to do this to me again. And so it was one step at a time. I'm going to start, okay, this is one day was, I'm just going to, I won't push myself to go all the way down the street, but I'm going to walk halfway up the street. And then I came back, and the whole time my heart is pounding, okay? And what made everything more intense at the time was that I did not live in a particularly friendly neighborhood. It was what I call concrete jungle in Daly City, California. And the people in that neighborhood were sort of, cold and distant and sometimes rude. So I didn't feel that warm, fuzzy, neighborly feeling like if something happened, there would be someone kind to give me a hand. In fact, let me continue the story, but that brings me to an incident I had. So as I began to grow in my strength, I was able to go not just halfway up the street, but all the way up the street and then down the street. And down was more, it was easy, but going up was a little harder, of course, because then you're getting sort of a workout. And mind you, I was pretty weak at that point because I wasn't really getting regular exercise, not even normal people exercise, like getting up in the morning and people make their coffee and they might ride their bike or they might go out for a jog or they might just go to their job They walk to their car. Maybe they walk a half an hour out of the day. I didn't even have that much exercise. So this was all very scary. And so I would walk down the street, and one day I decided that I would go a bit further. And I had a specific mission. There was someone that I knew that lived a few blocks away, and I was going to their house. But on the way there, I started having an attack, which meant all of a sudden I went from being sort of nervous to downright anxious, and then my heart was pounding, and I thought, I can't make it, I can't do it, I can't, oh my God, I can't, oh God, this is not happening. And I was scared. And imagine this little white girl in this neighborhood where there were mostly, I was a minority actually. There was mostly an Asian neighborhood at the time. And I remember there was this guy out in front washing his car. And I remember I was just in a panic, and I said, "Sir," and I was kind of stuttering. I couldn't talk normally. And I said, "Sir, can I maybe use your telephone? I need to call my grandpa." And he looked at me like I was a complete freak. So he heard me. Maybe he didn't understand me. Maybe I looked like a drug addict. I don't know. But the bottom line is that he looked at me like a freak and then turned his back, kind of rolled his eyes, and continued washing his car or rubbing it down with a cloth. So at that point, one of my fears had manifested. It had literally come true, which was that the world was a mean place, and that when I was going through something hard, somebody would not be helping me. And that's exactly what happened. So I made my way up the hill. I had no other choice. What, was I going to fall down and wait for the angels to carry me? I had to find the strength in myself to walk up the hill. And I know how crazy this story sounds. It's a little funny telling the story because I've never met anyone that has such a ridiculous fear. But that was my reality. So I made it. And then I was completely exhausted, spent, and but it didn't entirely stop me. It stopped me for a while, and then I went back into dependency mode and avoiding the world and avoiding going out. But eventually I had to come out again. Eventually I realized, well, that happened. Let's take a deep breath and keep going. And so eventually there were different reasons, occasions for me to want to explore the world, get to know people in the neighborhood, get to go down and check out the art exhibit that was happening in town one day. That completely changed my life as well. I didn't know that would lead to me meeting other people and joining a dance group and just completely changing my whole day-to-day life. But I still had many different layers to work through to get through the exhaustion and all the effort it took to be able to even talk with people. I mean, there was also a fear of talking on the phone. There was a fear of crowds and people, period. So now I can say in retrospect that there are legitimate reasons to be afraid in this world, and there are people that will take advantage or people that just don't care. But I will also say that the biggest enemy you will ever face in your life is yourself. And the most fearsome creature you will ever face is yourself. And that is something that I had to continuously remind myself. I had to remind myself during these hard times that even though people sucked, the world is a harsh place, and bad things happen to good people sometimes. Actually, a lot of times. But I had to learn how to trust myself. and how not to fear myself, how not to fear my body, how not to fear my mind when it raced and crazy thoughts would go through it. And as I trained myself to just lean a little bit more into myself and ask, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? Does anyone actually own your soul but you? Maybe it would help to ask yourself that the next time you feel completely gripped by fear, completely immobile, strapped down, where you just can't even. Ask yourself, is this even real? Is this even mine? And is this who I am? And just let it all unravel and reveal what it will. Don't try to fight it. Let it be what it is. And if you judge it, just observe the judgment. Some of this is a little hard to put into words because it's one of those things you have to experience. Once you've experienced the glory of looking your fear in the face, there's nothing else in this world that can ever really hold you down. You can have temporary bouts of fear. If you're walking down a dark alley in a bad neighborhood, which you shouldn't be doing, but if you should ever find yourself in a situation where, or there's a tiger running after you, well then, yeah, that's normal to have fear. But never again will you be in that place where you're living day to day, afraid to even leave your front door. Because, first of all, you've recognized and accepted the fact that there is danger in this world, and that to avoid that danger is to cause even more suffering for yourself and possibly other people, because there's nothing that we do or don't do that doesn't have an impact somehow, some way on those around us, and vice versa. So the only person you can really take responsibility for, even if all you have is your mind, even if you're lying in a bed, in a sick bed, and you can barely move. Because I'll tell you, I've been there too. I've been there in that bed, barely able to move, and I had to find a way to come to grips with what I was dealing with in my own mind. This is the key. This is the key. So, the last thing I want to talk about today is, I just want to mention that there are also various tools and various flower essences that can help overcome fear. And I've written about some of these in my book, Flower Spirit Medicine. But, for example, there are 5 or 6 flower essences from the Bach line of flower essences, which are today perhaps the most popular, the easiest to find essences that even you can get in most health food stores. And these essences include rock rose, which is for extreme terror or fright when you feel completely gripped, unable to move, frozen. When it's for sometimes irrational fear. It's definitely for the more extreme forms of fear. Then another one is Mimulus, which is one that you can take for episodes when you just feel this constant underlying fear and you're not even sure what it's about. Actually, no, I take that back. That is a specific fear. It's for fears that are about specific basic things. Fear of leaving the house, a fear of failure in an exam, a fear of getting in a car accident. It could be the fear of embarrassment and so on. Mimulus is really, really helpful for that. And then there's cherry plum, which is cherry plum, like rock rose, is one of the 5 essences included in the very popular rescue remedy, the 5-flower rescue remedy. Cherry plum is when you just feel like you're going to lose your mind. I was talking about that earlier. When you feel like you've completely you've just lost control. This is definitely one for irrational fear that leads people to do crazy things like jump off a cliff, and even sometimes hurt other people without really wanting to. When you just start swinging because you just, whoa, this is a crazy house, get me out of here. Cherry plum, that is the essence for that state of mind. Then there's the up all night, the constant mental chatter, the monkey mind. The white chestnut helps to clear the mind of clutter and to just even out so that you can actually get some sleep. And then there's aspen, that's the one where you don't really know why you're afraid, but you're afraid. You just feel this sense of dread, like you feel something bad is going to happen. And, you might convince yourself that this is your intuition, like something's really ominous or imminent, but it actually doesn't happen. So then you're left with yourself. Aspen can really help with that. And then the other one, which is a little bit understated, but important nonetheless, is red chestnut. This is the essence for people who are overly concerned with their loved ones. This is also helpful for certain healing practitioners and nurses, caregivers, when you're taking too much on of the other person's illness or worries, problems, etc. So those are the basic Bach flower essences for fear. And there are so many other things I can mention, certain supplements, certain foods, certain exercises. I have so many things to share, but I'd like to get some input from those of you who are listening, because I'd like to know what's helpful and what you really want out of this, because I want to cater it to your needs and to what you feel is going to be the most useful thing to you, until I feel inspired to just go ranting like I've done today. So thank you all for listening, and if you are interested in a reading from me, please get a hold of me by emailing me at readingsbyyerevan@gmail.com. You can also check out my blog, readingsbyyerevan.com. I also would be happy to assist you as a life coach, or wellness coach, working through your fears. I've helped countless people over the years with some major fear around their health, around their careers, around their relationships, and I've seen some beautiful transformations. And so that is part of what I do as a healing practitioner. It's more on the emotional and psychic levels that I do the healing work, but there are many tools at my disposal, and there are many different methods that I can recommend. So thank you all for listening, and have a beautiful day.